when we took this dance lesson, we just had a fabulous time. And I could tell you that starting a client relationship like that created a form of trust that I have never seen since.
Welcome to the Workplace Theater Podcast, where we explore the joy, the pain, the comedy, and human connections that make up the world of work culture. In this episode, we delve into how the workplace often resembles a theater and how conflicts can arise that put your reputation on the line. Our hosts, Chris, Michelle, Joe, and Julius, share their insights and experiences while offering practical advice on navigating the complex world of workplace culture. So sit back, grab your popcorn, and let's dive into the fascinating world of workplace theater.
We are here on the Workplace Theater. So excited to have you. Before we get into it, let's go around and just hear from each person and who their persona and their character is. Joe, start with you.
So I am the solutionist, and the solutionist is like a problem solver that doesn't actually go out and seek problems. Problems find him.
I'm Michelle. I'm the catalyst, and the way I think about myself as someone who likes to get things done, but especially with other people, and just sort of the energy that I get from other people. I also have a pharmaceutical background. I've been in corporate America for many years, and so Catalyst sort of has a little bit of a chemical reaction element to it too, so I thought it was a good character name.
Nice. Solutionist, you didn't tell us about your background.
Oh, my background.
Yeah.
So I've been solving problems for people for over 20 years, right? Throughout different levels of corporate America, with family business, with our own business now. So I just solve problems. Just come up with creative solutions and just solve problems. So that's the solutionist.
Nice. Well, my first name is Julius, but my stage name, because I come from the entertainment background, is Julius the Mad Thinker. And that actually came not from me. It came from I used to manage a hip-hop group, and we were filming a music video, actually. And at the end of the ideation period, there's 10 MCs, and they all decided what they wanted the music video to be, and I was the last person. So I laid out what I thought the music video should be, and one of the MCs, after I was finished, said, it was like total silence, and he was like, the Mad Thinker. So that's how I became the thinker. So, yeah. So 20 plus years of travel and hospitality, DJ and event production, and thinker. That's it.
The Mad Thinker.
Yeah, Chris.
Love it.
So Chris, how about you?
So the connector is what I consider myself. I spent 20 years trying to connect kids to their dreams, mentoring, coaching. For the past 12 years, I've spent connecting people to organizations and to opportunities that are a great fit for them or their next career choice in life. And I think that a big kind of frame of reference for us with the workplace theater is looking at that connection. But how do we connect with the people next to us, whatever character it is that they may be playing, but trying to really find out what that character is, what character are we, and then let's meet in the middle for a common vision. So I love connecting people, love helping people try and understand where their true connection lies in this world. So super excited. Thank you guys. Super.
Yeah. Awesome.
So let's get into it a little bit. We're here to talk just about that, right? Workplace theater. Joe, tell me a little bit more about, in your world these days, as you think about workplace theater, what comes to mind?
Well, so what I love most about our title here is just the pageantry in work, right? It's a show, right? We might not think about it that way, but if you walk into some place, right? We walk in a new client, and they already have a culture. They already have a political structure. They already have the king and queen. They already have the jester, right? And if they don't have the jester, we'll bring him. So we just, there's all these characters everywhere, and they're all at play. And they all have their place and they all have value, right? And so what I hope most for this podcast is that we can show and demonstrate that value, right? And find those interesting stories that compel people to think differently, to reach out more, to connect more, to think more, right? To become a catalyst more, to solve more problems, right? And they all bring their own flavor. They all bring their own character and be more true to themselves. So that's what I'm really excited about with this podcast.
Love it. I love it. Let's skip over to Julius. Julius, what about you?
Ooh, when I think about workplace theater, I think about probably one of my most fun and most interesting jobs, which was the healthcare. Health club, not healthcare. It was almost like healthcare, but
It could have been.
yeah, it was like the health club. Just because there's such a range of characters. One guy would, he'd, be working, then go out and hang out in the parking lot, go get high. One of the other guys was came straight from corporate and decided he wanted to do the health club thing, and he was top salesperson, but be stealing all the deals. So then you had managers, you had relationships that were happening in the workplace. You had even these relationships that you'd get into with people that started really trivial and then just became almost like your best friend over years and years and years, right? So it just reminds me of the different characters that you work with in every job that I've ever had, especially coming from entertainment. We call artists. There's the artist who may have some ability and just at doing whatever their art is, but then there's the artist, right? And this person has this ungodly talent. However, the personality is just all over the place, can do anything at any given point. There's no borders. Right, and you just have to accept that person for who they are, and you're always constantly reminded. And I think that's one of the things I'm bringing to this podcast is that purview, that perspective of letting people be who they are. And I think it's so important in the workplace.
Is that artist the one that creates this beautiful mural and then 2 days later is I got to paint over it?
Yeah, maybe, or the person who says who paints that mural, and then someone says, I'll give you $10 million for it, and they say it's not for sale.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the artist. But it's just a range of personalities. So Michelle, you said you come from pharmaceutical. So what is workplace theater to you?
Yeah. So as you were talking about the characters at the health club, I come from healthcare. I think about my very first boss that I had there, who was a big influence on me, and he really showed me how you don't want to have all type A's on your team. It really is about when I go to a theater and I see a play, there's all different characters are kind of having different roles. Not everyone has the stage for the entire time. Plus, there's people who are making it magic through the way that the lighting is and the background and the stage setting. I think about workplace theater. Just we're bringing our whole selves to work and playing the roles that we truly are in a good, healthy workplace. Where you're actually encouraged to be yourself. I worked for my company for decades, and I went through having my kids, and my friends at work threw me a baby shower, and we really became part of each other's lives. It doesn't always work that way, and so I'm aware that that's not always wonderful workplaces don't abound. But at the same time, that's what really appeals to me about our title, that I think there is the joy, the comedy, the tragedy, the tears, and work is actually part of our lives, and I think there's a lot to explore there about how is it part of our lives? How can we make it better?
Yeah, I think too. It reminds me of producing events, and the one thing coming from entertainment, you never take for granted where someone may be spiritually, physically, emotionally, right? And that it really doesn't matter what your job is, right? and that kind of freedom that I see people, kind of live out in the entertainment world where they can really truly be themselves. There's this kind of vibe that you get from people that they speak about their work completely differently. I've noticed when we're out on the beach someplace versus right, right before they get ready to go to work, right? So
in the middle of traffic,
exactly, or on the train bumping into somebody, right? And it reminds me, it makes me think that yes, people are characters, but in actuality, if you think about theater or film or whatever, it's always based on some real experience that you had. So although we're characters, we're real people, and it's either way, it's the same.
I love it. So when we're working, right, what I'm hearing is that without all those people, right, it doesn't work, right? If all those people aren't aligned on the same page, then we're not really getting the work done. And really, that's the human connection, right, that we're talking about, the human-centered engagement approach to work, where it's a theater, it's a play, it's an entertaining thing, right, that we can really go to and have fun with, but looking at all the pieces of the puzzle, putting them together allows us to get the work done. So what do you all think when the thought human-centered engagement comes to mind? What kind of resonates with you all?
Okay, well, I have kind of a longer story for human-centered engagement. So, like I said earlier, I produce destination music events. And years ago, one of the members of our community, this 3 Degrees community, which was a events that would happen every Wednesday in Chicago, and it was members only, but it was free, but members only. And what would happen is the whole theory was if the world was based on 6 degrees of separation, we felt that like-minded individuals all had to be 3, right? So it was free, but you had to be a friend of a friend, or a friend of a friend's friend. And what would happen, people would go in and discover these positive commonalities, right? Every time someone would discover this positive commonality, it'd be like, wait a minute, hey, I think I've seen you before. How'd you know about this? Oh, my friend's Joe. Joe, wait, Joe who? Joe Natal? I know Joe Natal. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden it was like this spark. So that's what I got from this experience. Well, one of the members of the community, 3 Degrees community, we caught up years later, and he was really excited about his new business as interior design / architecture, right? But really interior, focused on the interior. And he was telling me, he's like, yeah, man, human-centered design. He's like, it's just a way that, you think about design. And he was talking about how it affects, where things are placed, how it's all created. It makes a huge impact on the engagement of where people are, how they communicate. And I just remember him talking about it, and I started thinking about it. I was like, man, okay, if human-centered design was how he was thinking about that, man, when we were 3 Degrees, the way that we were hosting, I guess that might have been like human-centered engagement. So this is kind of in the back of my head, right? Then years later, we talked again, and it kind of reaffirmed. And then over the pandemic, getting to meet you all, we started to kind of talk about some of the different ideas, problems to solve in the workplace. Hire, train, retaining, diversity, equity, inclusion, destigmatizing mental health. And I think a series of these conversations are kind of commonality between all of us. In one way, shape, or form, we had already been like listening and connecting with people and had this similar approach to solving these problems, which was a human-first approach. So that's human-centered engagement to me. But Joe, we've had hours of conversation about this, right?
We ad nauseum, right? But in a great way. I forgot that we were talking about destigmatizing mental health and how we could get that out into the marketplace, right? Help people to, just understand we're human beings. There's all kinds of things that are going on, with the pandemic, with other things that were affecting our minds. And we came to that conclusion of the problem is trust. no one wants to talk about this because they're afraid, they don't trust people. And that was kind of that catalyst, right? And all of a sudden, I remember a couple days later, you sent that image over of human-centered engagement. I was like, this came out of our conversation. Like, I don't believe it. Like, and the process is beautiful and it's perfect. As you know, as somebody who coaches a lot of people, it's a perfect construct for coaching. There's no simpler way. There's no more expansive way to coach somebody than to follow the steps of human-centered engagement, right? That's it. It's that simple. And it was beautiful. And I completely forgot. It came out of that conversation. Destigmatizing mental health. How do we help people when, you know, everyone's too afraid to seek it out? And look at what came out of it. And hopefully, you know, as years progress, the stigma of mental health will subside. We'll have those relationships. We'll have that authenticity. We'll have that connection and that trust, right?
Yeah. So Michelle, in pharmaceutical and your environment, trust had to been kind of like, how it's all good. So trust had to been like, how was that? Like trusting your coworkers, how was trust built?
Well, what came to mind as you were talking, Joe, was about a moment where there was sort of a rift in trust within the corner of the industry that I was in. So we've been working with AI and machine learning for a while, but we're starting to apply it to, you know, the specific area that I was focused on. And the folks who had expertise in the areas where we were applying AI were getting really sort of taken aback by, what's this you're giving me? I could have told you that. Or, you know, why do I have to read these reports? Or why are you funneling me in a certain direction when I can tell you it really should be a different direction because you don't understand the nuances? And people really feeling like they were being devalued, that they were becoming obsolete. And part of my job was to help them understand, but also even our own team understand the importance of the human mind on top of the data. And so that became, you know, you could get something spit out at you and follow it blindly, and it will cause all kinds of problems until you have someone who actually, you know, has lived the issue to put the eyes on top of it. It can save them a ton of money and a ton of time if you can build the trust between the people and the data. So it just got me curious about human-centered engagement and just prioritizing that beauty and gift that humans can give. So that was one kind of lane that I'm really passionate about. The other piece is I've done a lot of anti-racist learning. And so, you know, a little before George Floyd, but of course the whole country kind of has gone through a little bit of an evolution with that tragic murder. That was something that really has gotten me to do a lot of inner work and you know, some volunteering as well. And it all kind of comes down to how society tends to separate ourselves from our humanity. You know, the workplace is a great example of that as well. And so I'm really passionate about bringing us back to our humanity from an anti-racist lens.
So you were going to, those are all great points. You were going to, before we got into our actual burning question, you had some things to talk about to bring to the mix of things. And I think because you mentioned AI, and I remember you, briefly talking about that, but yeah.
Yeah. So if we want to dive into that now, our sort of headline for today to just kind of get us chatting. We know that AI has been in the headlines with it's actually been in the headlines for a long time, but most recently gotten a lot of attention with some of the ChatGPT, et cetera. But I also came across something that I wanted to mention in the group today, and that's sort of, you know, it took a while for us to get to this point. You know, what's that next one going to be? And it's called organoid intelligence. Have you heard of this? So at Johns Hopkins, they're growing in a petri dish skin cells that have been altered to become acting like brain cells. And the idea here is that the brain is still, you know, the pinnacle of computing power. and can learn and contextualize in a way that AI now can't do. AI now can do amazing things, but there's things that the brain can do that it can't. So there's a lot of interest in, could you sort of hijack what the brain cell can do and create some other kind of, higher level intelligence that theoretically can serve us. But I think I'd like to open it up to the floor as far as, where could that go wrong? Or how do we feel about that as humans to have, brains kind of being grown? They've already done an experiment. You might have seen this where they let these cells learn the game of Pong. If you remember the old Pong game. And it actually learned Pong pretty well. And it's been sort of the first demonstration of how this can be harnessed. This is within our lifetimes, yes. It's not going to be like next year that this thing's going to take a lot of development still, but
yeah.
Thoughts?
Well,
I have a question with that. So just posing this, if the brain matter, the thing, is never connected to a real human.
Right.
And there's never real human-centered
That's
connection.
right.
So then are we ever really connecting with technology? I don't think we can grow anything, right, that has no human connection and still call it human. So it'll never be the real thing. It'll always be,
Yeah.
do you know?
Yeah, there's a layer that's removed because it's learning, right? It's learning, but the question is how well does it learn? And then the question ends up being, if you think about technology, I remember in music, a music reference, there's like there's CD, there's your vinyl, there's your, transistor radio, whatever the case, and technology changes all the time, right? But then, there's a big thing when we go to the clubs and the file that you use, only probably 1% of the people can tell what the file actually is, right? Whether it was an MP3 or was it, an AIF or a WAV file, for instance, right? So this is very similar. What you're saying makes sense, but then after a while, if you cannot tell, there's an impact for that, right? You may, think about it. People produce all types of different things, right? I mean, just imitation watches, right? It's hard to tell an imitation watch, right? So now this is just to the next level. If you have this organoid, right, that has the ability to actual learn with the brain and potentially tap in further than we as humans are able to tap into. So we may have a definition of what connection actually is, but what if when you tap further into your brain, connection means something further than you can even comprehend? And maybe that has the ability to do that. Now that's scary, and that goes all the way back down to trust, right? But that's how I would respond.
I think it also kind of will force us to claim and understand, what does it mean to be human? Is it about what we can think? Is it about what we do? Is it about something else? Is it about connection?
Is it how we feel?
Yeah.
Right? And as you were saying that, that's the first thing that I thought of, right? Is so if we can manufacture brain thinking, is that going to manufacture logic? Is that going to manufacture computing? What's that going to manufacture? Does that manufacture feelings, right? So
Emotion. Yeah.
So if our feelings are not coming from our heart, they're coming from our head, right? Now that's a very interesting concept for us as human beings to learn from this. Let's say they decide to, everyone's afraid of it, like the machines rising from Terminator, and they scrap it. But what would be interesting is the learning from that, to see what actually does come out of that. Because what if is it our brain that limits our brain, or is it our emotion that limits our brain, right? Is it something beyond us? Is it something spiritual, right? That has us limited for a purpose or a reason, right? That's billions of people around the world meet religiously and contemplate these things. So is a very, very interesting. You know, I don't know if we want to talk about the road to get there, right? So there's a lot going on with AI that's new and cutting edge that'll kind of lead to these things that might lead us to some of the things, you know, as the solutionist, right? I'm like, so let's see what the problems might be there. I don't know if we want to spend some time and talk about that or.
Yeah, I think let's get to, I think, today's episode as far as the burning question. I think the real burning question is, how does that play out into the workforce? So if you want to explore that road too, but how does it play out?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at what's happened with automation, right? Automation, AI, right? So as the computer came to the workforce, right, it was going to eliminate so many jobs, and to an extent, it did, right? It eliminated many tasks, and it changed the workforce, right? It required you to be, you know, instead of somebody that was physically doing something, maybe somebody that was behind a desk and, you know, pushing keys instead of pushing paper. That automation, right? That Michelle, you were talking about automation, those reports, those things, right? We were able to take tedious tasks away, right? I'm doing the same formula every single time. I'm processing the same spreadsheet. I'm typing in these numbers every single time. Like, why can't this spreadsheet connect to this spreadsheet? And why can't we actually just get that data from this other source and just have it populate in everywhere it needs to populate? Like, I remember thinking that thought in 2003, right? Like, this information is housed here on this piece of paper. Why must I sit and type it? It's there. It's in the computer. Let's just connect it, right? But now when that goes to AI, right? So there's that automation, right? You're looking at a report and you're like, that report's not right. So it means the input wasn't correct, or the input is correct and there's a problem. I loved seeing those. I'm solutionist, right? So it's like, that report's not right. Let's figure it out. Mm-hmm. Is the report wrong, or is the data right and we have a bigger issue? And those were my favorite things for about 5 seconds, and then no good deed goes unpunished, right? It's like, hey, I found this huge problem within what we do. Let's go fix it. Everyone's like, no. I don't want to relearn my job. So we're just sitting with this glaring problem, and the solutionist is like, must fix now. Please, let's fix this. I can't look at another report that's wrong. So I think when we look at, you know, and going into AI, with this launch of AI, what was the big news? All of these big issues, like an AI platform going back and swearing at people, like picking a fight, right? And so it's only as good as the programming. But now with this bioengineering, like, that's really interesting, because what is the programming? Mm-hmm. If there is no if the programming is organic, like, it's really interesting. It scares me because I don't know anything about it, and I'm just, you know, I'm just conservative with things, like, things that I don't know about, they scare me because I want to get educated. But yeah, that could answer a lot of questions, and it can solve a lot of problems if we actually have that data, that information.
Mm-hmm. So how did it play out for you, Michelle? Like,
you mean for this organoid intelligence thing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So how would that have played out, you know, based on your experience based on your experience of how people were receiving, you know, your workmates were receiving, you know, having to move forward with technology. So how would something like this have played out?
I think not well. I think that we do need to do a really good job for the people who understand what the technology is, whether that's AI or organoid intelligence or whatever name it's going to have when I'm dead and gone and it's a thing that everybody uses. I think the people who understand the thing, my personality is, I think that those folks have a responsibility to their fellow humans to make it less scary. Just it's just the next evolution. And I try to be sort of an ever learning kind of person, and I think that we have something in our culture. I think is sort of like, well, you're cooked after high school, or maybe you're cooked after college, and then it's just sitting back and letting life happen. But I think it's about ensuring that we're all comfortable with learning, comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's when you're learning, is when you're just like, whew, this doesn't feel good, and not reacting in a contracting way. Because, when we feel threatened, when we feel like I'm not going to be needed here, maybe in a workspace, maybe I'm going to be laid off, or maybe the thing that I've been known for, now someone can just bloop, press a button and it spits out, and you're just like, crap, well, what am I here for? It feels bad. And so I think that what I get excited about is, how can it serve us? How could something like that serve us and free us up to do the things like you were saying with the spreadsheet, Joe? If you didn't have to do that transcribing into the spreadsheet, what amazing problems could you be solving? I mean, let's face it, we've got incredible problems to solve, and I feel like it could free us up to do that. That's kind of where my brain goes.
Well, and real quick, selfishly, at that time, I was like, I just want to go home. I just want to have a life, right? So that was that was my solution.
Great point.
Instead of working 70 hours a week,
we don't have to just submit ourselves to the workplace,
right?
24/7.
Yeah. Automation was like, please, so I don't have to work more.
Living authentic lives, and I mean, I think that in my regular life, home life, there's still problems to solve. So it still could kind of free me up to have more focus and energy for those things that matter to me, whatever those are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you think that it's there's this extra responsibility for management to encourage your workforce or your team to constantly be learning, just because, not only because you want someone to learn, to keep up, but so that you don't get deleted, right? Is that more important now than ever, or has it always been?
I mean, I think I don't know if I can say it's more important now than ever, but maybe yes, because it just seems like things are accelerating. But I also want to clarify, I think it's important for work to create space for people to learn, but not feel forced to learn the things that you're interested in. It's important to find the path, and there may be some tentacles to even, let's do something that's a little bit more tangible that's here now, and that's AI. Maybe there's a path within what's happening in AI that someone's interested in, versus everyone's got to learn about this and we're all going to be marching in lockstep. I think the beauty is and what's fun about learning is just it's surprising you, what's this next thing that I'm going to find on the path that intrigues me, pulling that thread and unraveling the sweater,
Yeah, I think it also boils down to the personality type as well. I remember,
True.
Coming up in school, I would be more intimidated. I'd be more intimidated having to read something, not because I couldn't read, but because I was worried about how well I could read. So then I would just read it and not comprehend anything, right? So if you think about technology, the issue really is that it's your relationship with it. And then if you think about how fast it's going, many people have already kind of defaulted themselves as not the tech person. Mm-hmm. So think about that inside of the workplace, and you're bringing on new technology. Fortunately, it usually takes a while before you really can implement it anyway. Mm-hmm. But if you've already defaulted yourself as the person who's not the tech person, and now there's new technology, learning, you may be a person who loves to learn, right? So I think it would then also be, how is it being delivered, right? Who's communicating, how your skill set can apply it, right? There's a lot of explanation that would need to be, and you'd really have to think about the different types of people that are on your team.
I think that's true. And I'm just thinking more about, is it really we're here talking about the workplace. So yes, I think it's fair to say that it's a responsibility of management to, create a growth mindset environment in their workplace. But I also am thinking about maybe it's schools or families or whatever. And I know you work with youth so much, Chris, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, to also create that there, because I think sometimes people resist some of the learning about the new tech or whatever because they're trying to protect themselves. Like, I don't want to have to be farting around with all this stuff. I just want to go home and I want to, have a meal with my family or whatever it is. Is there a way to sort of marry those two things together so that we can, have the comfort of home and that little bit of discomfort, kind of integrating into what's happening with our fellow people in the world that is driven by some of these tech advances?
I don't see it being used in schools enough, and I don't see us making it the base of education right now. And I think that it should be. And I think that, to Julia's point of, has it always been like this? I think we've always needed training around things and learning and development. But technology has always been like this other thing. But now it's not the other thing anymore. It's the thing that allows us to supplement our work better. And also, I heard you mention about who's the one relaying the message to the employees and to the youth. People have to realize, like, hey, this is going to make your life easier. But if we're like, oh, you got to go through this training, you got to get to this to do this, that doesn't excite anybody, But what excites people is say, hey, would you like to do your job twice as fast and have more time to do this? So I think how we're really relaying that message. But at the end of the day, it's like, we're using this to augment us, to make us better people and better communicators, and to leverage it as a tool versus the kind of end all be all.
And bringing it back to the workplace, there's another issue though, because if you think we live in a world of competitiveness, right? Good old capitalism, right? So if you think about the actual race that's going on with AI, right? You have people who are hell-bent and determined to be the first to introduce certain aspect to be able to sell back, right? So if you think about that's happening, in actuality, those people don't want folks to learn as quickly as possible. They don't want them to learn, right? Because then they can't sell you. They may be able to know more than you want them to know about the product that you're trying to sell, right?
Well, one, I think what you're suggesting, Julius, is that, businesses want consumers, but the thing that would be scary would be creators, right? And so if we think about, specifically underserved populations, if you can teach a young kid from Austin, right? We work in the Austin neighborhood with Your Passion First. If you could teach that kid how to develop AI, that could be life-changing, but it can also be, now detrimental to these big companies that have invested billions of dollars, right? And as people hang out for one of our later segments, I actually have a real situation I'd like to bring as one of our workplace stories of something that I know of that happened at one of these big companies, right? And so that can be very disruptive, right? And it's great to be a consumer, right? It's great. You're going to get information so much faster, just playing with it a little bit, right? We found, hours of research that if you ask the right question, you can get the response in minutes, right? Now, you still need to be intelligent enough to test it, right? Just like we talked about with the reports, right? The report doesn't look right. I need to be able to test that. Is it the question I asked? Is it the inputs? Is it the report that I generated? What doesn't look right? But if we blindly just accept it, right? What might happen is you're reporting to, I'm reporting to the executives, and here's the number. This is what the report spit out, And somebody else that has a little more information might look at it and say, that number is, if that number is accurate, we have a big problem, right? Or you screwed up. And they're like, I didn't even write the report. I just generated the number, right? That's the number. So there's the danger of just blindly accepting whatever's there. But the ability to produce, I think, is really that's the key.
So we just talked about a lot of different dynamics. Now we haven't even talked about the actual diversity within a workforce, right?
Exactly.
And part of this podcast and what we're exploring is it even possible to transform work culture, right? So we brought in the aspect of, if you think about, there's a payoff in management if you do just enough to be above average, pretty good, right? Be pretty good. And for the learning curve to not excel, right? Or, accelerate or whatnot, just be right there. There's a payoff. Everybody's had a boss that you felt like, man, it feels like I just do a little bit more than them. I know more than them, but they're there, right? So you can't do too much because then they know how to, so there's a payoff for it being exactly the way it is, right? So I bring that up because that's a dynamic that even when you want change to happen in the workplace, be it technology, be it just the way humans connect, there's a payoff for it staying the way that it is. So can it really transform? That's what I'm interested to hear. And all the guests we have coming up in these conversations, I'm a bit skeptical. I'm optimistic from one perspective because I come from entertainment, right? And I know what happens when people connect. Doesn't matter what you're trying to do. Once you connect and you find that shared interest, you'll change your perspective. Sometimes it's only instant and needs to happen a few times, and sometimes it's like almost life-changing, right? So I know that can happen, but even when it does happen, there's a payoff for it staying the same. So that's the part that really that I'm interested in as a conversation. And we haven't even talked about the diversity within the workplace and how does that factor in with the technology, with the learning curve, with the different personalities. Are we making too much of diversity because there's already too much, or are we not making enough? And I'm going to toss that to you, Michelle.
A light question. Well, as the white lady at the table, I'm not sure I'm really perfectly set up to talk about this, so I'll invite the rest of y'all to comment. But you covered so many things in the lead up to the softball you just threw me.
Fastball.
Yes. So, obviously my answer to this is yes, we need more diversity in the workplace. And as you two were talking, I was thinking about, you can work twice as fast and get home to your family. And, some of the problems that can be solved to, move things ahead. I think that the evolution is going to be about bringing us to our humanity, right? So can we get it so that the work gets done? Maybe the organoid intelligence or something else will bust up what you just described, where the managers are sort of like keeping the people down. It was sort of like the disruption when, we became sort of an information-based economy. Well, that's now going to be disrupted. So will we have the same kinds of power dynamics, or are those going to change? I think they're going to change. Mm-hmm. How? I don't know. But I do think that we are moving towards, more of a focus on humans for lots of different reasons. The social awakening that's happening from sort of a racial and economic standpoint is kind of like there's a groundswell happening there, even though there's a lot of backlash now as well. And some of these technologies, this isn't really a tech podcast necessarily, but we're kind of on that topic. I think some of these technologies, if used wisely and creatively, maybe put some human brains on that thing, could actually, like I say, serve us. It could be something that could lay the groundwork for something new and different to happen and not just be the same old story, the same old capitalistic story that we're all used to, with the different flavor of the month, you know? And I do think that the people who are, you know, my heroes are the grassroots activist types who are reimagining the world. And I think that the work that they're doing underground right now, it doesn't get a lot of press, it doesn't get a lot of play, but it's there and it's happening. That, you know, I don't know that, you know, marrying tech with that work is going to happen, maybe. But I do think that sort of the human-focused piece of what we're talking about could be like just the right moment of these two things kind of ripening at the same time, kind of coming together, could be something really exciting.
It is that time right now, and it's a good point. The people who are doing the actual work, and you just talked about activists, right? And Joe, you talked about some of the kids that we talked about in the program. Bringing those kids' brain to what's happening right now is essential.
Yes.
Because otherwise, well, the good thing is, first, the good thing is that the learning curve for AI right now is not steep, because all you have to do is bring your mind to it, and you need to question it and explore. That's really what's required on the base level to make an impact, right? If that does not happen, then what happens is the world, we all, are allowing those folks who traditionally always have been at the forefront of everything to either co-opt the message, co-opt the inputs, co-opt everything, right? So the real opportunity right now is for those folks who maybe don't necessarily have the voice, right? But they have the brain and they're willing to do the work. Get them on this technology like right now, right? Let them talk about what they see, what problems they're actually having. Because then what could happen is the actual problems that need to be solved actually start getting solved. Not someone finds out how to solve them and then essentially just controls the amount of time its progress, right? So this has happened in technology all the time. Like, oh, we found this out. Okay, well, we're going to go through all these stages. First, we're going to charge you $3,200 for a gig, like what I paid for I think 1 gig back in the day when we first got Pro Tools. I think it cost us $3,200 for a gig, right? So, and then it just keeps going on, right? Whereas if
now it's $32 for a terabyte.
Exactly, right. So imagine, like, right now you get folks who are really trying to solve problems, who are doing the work, who have some solutions, get their minds on this stuff now. The rate at which they're finding out how to progress or solve these problems can exceed, and surpass those gatekeepers, right? So I think that's a real opportunity. Of course, those gatekeepers will then change the game to look at who
getting kids in tech, right? I mean, that's what it boils down to.
I think if the focus remains solving problems, I'm like so with you. If the focus is, getting them into tech so that they can become other machines, that's what I think we need to be careful about, right? So for them to write their own tickets, solve the problems, like be the leaders, yes, absolutely. But I worry that we end up sort of pushing kids into, and I'm a parent, I'm guilty of this, pushing kids into something that we know will work for the world we're in. We have a responsibility for setting them up to be successful in the world we actually live in, while trying to, respect their humanity and allowing them to blossom as the people that they are. So I think humans do have a propensity to solve problems. I'm hungry, I'm gonna go find some food. I'm lonely, I'm gonna find a friend. Like those are instinctual things that I think need to be fed. But solving problems as in, let me create a need and then I can fill it, like, ew, I don't like that.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm careful in the language. Like,
yeah, no, you didn't say that, but I was just clarifying.
No.
And somebody coming from pharma, I'm glad that you're worried about that, right?
Of course, yeah. Oh God! All right.
Well, that's why
whole other podcast.
Yes. I'm careful about getting kids in tech, right? Just blanket, right? I like you have something to offer. When you have little resources, you have to be more creative, right? So therefore, if I bring you to this problem and ask you how you look at this, right? It's not about the tech, it's about your brain. It's about how you see things, right? How you compute what will happen to make something else happen. That's what I'm interested in. I think that would be kind of the campaign, I would say, more so, because sometimes the getting kids in tech, I hear that a lot. That reminds me of like, let's get these kids in tech to see what they can do so that we can do this for get them to do. Not that you were saying that.
It's to serve them.
Was the diversity of skin color and culture versus the diversity of thinking, right? And so it's giving kids more resources so that they can solve problems.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
So that their thinking is more collective. And I think AI and other things within tech are that means to that. So
It can be hugely empowering, absolutely.
Right. And just the progression, too, of, we put kids in tech to be button pushers, to say, well, let's put kids in tech to be button creators, to then really the progression being, let's put kids in tech to figure out what the purpose of even having the buttons are.
Yes.
Right? And that bridge of like human understanding and what are the real needs, right? Not the manufactured needs, but what are the real needs? What's missing? Like, what would I really want? And then the ability to create that and create those buttons that need to be pushed, and then have that, have a job for somebody to push a button, right? That could be really amazing and transformative, and a big, long conversation for another podcast, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, let's bring it all around, right? So, one of the things we want to do in the podcast is always present a situation so that listeners have an applicable way to, solve problems or some different situations that they may be going through and that they can relate to. So we've been talking about human-centered engagement. We've been talking about all types of dynamics that go on in the workplace. But the question is, how do you, here's the situation. Imagine being in sales, for instance, and your bonus is tied to, or your extra bonus is tied to your workforce, right? And the person that can get you over the top, get you that extra, 15K, whatever, right? Whatever it is. I'll say 15K in this case, right? That was a
The
health club
extra
thing.
dollar.
I say 15K because I go back to my health club, but you don't get along with them, right? And traditionally it's like, what can I do to motivate him, right? So how do you resolve that situation? And I'll go.
Let's have Chris kick it off.
Yeah. How do you resolve that? You've been in sales for years. You've
about 12, yeah.
Yeah. So what is it that you do to resolve a situation like that? Your bonus is tied to this person. You're leading them, and if they don't do it, then you don't get that bonus. So how do you resolve that?
I think if we look at our human-centered engagement touch points, the first thing I try and do is listen, right? Listen to the situation. Sometimes there was this instant where something shifted, right? Where you said something, they said something annoying was said, and then from that point, the relationship has just gotten sour. Once you listen, in that listening, you should be able to hear what that person's motivations are, right? Why are they here at work? Are they there for the money? Are they there to build friends? Are they there because they want to, open their own business at some point? And I think once you can really hear what that thing is, you can start to create a connection. Now, it doesn't mean a fake connection. Oh, great. Saw you like to do that. Now here's the job to do, right? No, it's like, let's really connect with them, right? And understand, oh, that's why we connect. Now I see your value, right? Now I see who you are, what you bring to the table. And that connection has allowed you as well to kind of see what I'm trying to do here as your manager, but also as your coworker. And I think from there, there's the trust that's built and you're able to challenge that person. But that takes time. That can take a year worth of time. That's not something that happens overnight, especially if the reason why it happened was something they really didn't like that you said or vice versa. So I think just really digging in, trying to understand, where the frame of reference is on both ends and trying to re-insulate that connection there and see each other's value.
Joe?
Yeah, so just one reaction to what Chris just said, and I loved everything about it. The only difference being with our process and flow for human-centered engagement, if you actually are authentically come to it, instead of a year, we can do that in an hour. We can do that and sometimes even in 10 minutes.
Workshop, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Sometimes even just in 10 minutes, we've practiced some things and we can create that connection in 10 minutes. So what then is possible, right? And so I'm thinking about the question, the situation, right? And there's a bunch of different factors, right? So as the solutionist, I'm also thinking about what are all the factors? What are all the parameters? What's, my analytical mind is like, what are all the different factors so that I can find that one path out that meets everything instead of just throwing, let's throw this at it or let's throw this at it. So those factors are important, but even inside of human-centered engagement, right? I think that approach, human-centered engagement, just works in this situation, right? So let's say we don't know what the factors are. We can have that conversation, we can listen, right? Maybe somebody was a high performer and they've been falling off. And we start to find that there's some personal problems in their life, right? They have a sick kid, right? Michelle and I have dealt with stuff with our kids, right? They're just, that takes something out of you, right? I remember when my son Jacob had to have surgery. I couldn't give more than 60% because, and I would be, it was probably the most focused I ever was in my life, right? Like ADD it wasn't possible to have ADD at that time. Like I needed to focus because I couldn't be there all nights, all hours of the night. I couldn't be there over the weekend. I needed to be home. I needed to give my wife some reprieve. I needed to be there for my son. I needed to be there for me, right? So it changed things. But if somebody was relying on me to put in my normal, 60, 70 hours that week, and I wasn't doing it, right? And that didn't meet the performance level, but they had no connectivity to what I was dealing with in my personal life, it could have gotten contentious. It could have been, a situation of like, well, you need to perform because that's what we're expecting of you. That's what we pay you for, blah, 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 blah. And so if you don't do that, go find another job, which at that point I would be like, all right, well, I'm not going to quit, but you can fire me. I'll take the severance and I'll take the unemployment because my family is actually more important, which would have been the first time in my life I ever said that, right? So those things in the situation, right? If you start incorporating human-centered engagement, you might find out what that is, right? You might find out what's going on. You might find out that they don't understand the product, or there's something in the process that changed that they don't understand, or there's just some mental block that they have, right? That getting them over the hump, right? Let's say it's a new salesperson, right? And they just don't know how to win a sale. They don't understand. Maybe there's a relational thing in your company that they're just not getting. They're going through the steps, but they're not stopping to use human-centered engagement, right, to make a connection with their client. So there's all kinds of different things that could be the cause behind this. But the sad reality is most of the time, right, if that situation were to happen today, right, if I'm looking at, if all the people on my team at the end of the quarter hit their numbers, I get a bonus, and I've got somebody who's not hitting their numbers, maybe I fire them, right? Like that's kind of the sad reality of a lot of times what happens, right? And talking to other sales leaders, that's, it's like I have to make my numbers because if I don't make my numbers, my boss is going to look at me that way.
Yeah, flipping that around. So, Michelle, is it even possible? I mean, how do you deal with that if you are management, especially in sales, right? When you have to produce, right? And you're a sales manager, you're responsible for everyone, but you have, upper management who's throwing all types of things your way, right? And expecting you also, what they would say is babysit, right, for someone else. I mean, is that fair or what? How do you look at that?
I find myself resistant to the premise of our question, only because I hate having money as the motivator. And I know that it is, that's what businesses are built on. But, there are businesses that have, return for the stockholder at the bottom of the list of importance, and the value for customers and the value for employees is at the top of the list of what's important. And so I think you can sort of still be a business that provides value in a monetary way for stakeholders, not stockholders, stakeholders and the employees, by thinking a little bit more long term, right? So, and I've never been in sales for this purpose. Like, I would not be that good in sales. But just kind of thinking from a broader standpoint, from business management and just being in business. This is not my concept, but I think it's an indigenous concept of 7 generations thinking, right? So, what would be the right approach for this person that is struggling on my team, for me, for my business writ large? 7 generations from now? Would it be to cram this person into the hole that he's supposed to fill and just beat him till he gets it done? That's a 0.1 generation thought. That's not really thinking long term. Who is this person? How are they really meant to show up in workplaces? We all have magic inside us, not to get too woo-woo. And it's about unlocking that. And I do feel like we each have a responsibility to do that for ourselves. But I mean, oh my God, I think about along the way so many pivotal relationships I've had with managers who helped me see, where I could go and how I could, unlock those things within myself. So I would say, maybe pushing this person so that I get my bonus and I keep my job is what's necessary for some other greater good. Maybe I don't know what it is. Maybe your daughter can't get cancer surgery because you don't get your bonus. All right, well, maybe there's some complex things to weigh. But let's just say nothing like that is in play. Right. I think that valuing the person, having all these conversations that you all just had, and him or her not even making the numbers that's needed for me to have the bonus, I think that would be okay for me. And I'm a very competitive person. It's just that to me, this would be more important, understanding what's going on. And maybe this sets the person up to be amazing for the next challenge. If you, just like you were saying, let me understand really what's going on. I had someone that I managed where we were working on, something that was like a development opportunity for the way he was leading his teams. And I was feeling like he wasn't understanding what I was asking him to do, and we had all these conversations to make that clearer. And when I stepped back and just asked a different question, what I realized was he felt like he was doing what I was asking him to do. He felt like he was actually delivering on what the goal was. And then I said, oh, well, that's a completely different problem to solve here. Now I need to better, come along together with this person to make sure we're on the same page about what's even expected. So I just, and then that enabled him to grow and, really run off to the races because that fundamental disconnect we had was resolved. So I will stop there.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah.
When we talk about human-centered engagement, right? If we're not looking at the same challenge, right? That's one place where we can be disconnected, right? If the challenge I'm presenting you is different than the challenge that you want to tackle or that you perceive that I'm presenting, we have a disconnect. But I just really quick, I just want to touch on something Michelle said, right in the beginning, right? When companies put their service first, when stakeholder profits are on the list, but they're not top on the list, I don't think we have this situation. I don't think they create a policy and a program in their sales department that limits bonuses based on one person not having a good quarter or a good month or a good year, right? And looking to nurture that person more, right? If you've made an investment in that person, if each employee is a stakeholder.
That's right.
If each customer is a stakeholder, if each stockholder is a stakeholder, right? How does that then change the dynamic? right?
Exactly,
And we're
right.
seeing B Corps, right? They're just, that could be a whole other podcast too.
Well, I think what sticks out to me a little bit of what everyone said, the first thing I go to is always you're just not connecting, right? Because in order to connect, you need to listen, right? But once you connect, you start to understand what someone's actual value is, right? And if a person can determine what their value is, then that's when they can determine their purpose, right? And I think that's what's missing in the workplace is a lot of time people don't even know what their value is, right? They know they're good at certain things, but they don't really know what their value is, and they don't really understand what their purpose, why they're here even on earth, right? It sounds deep, but I think that if you approach it in a way where you are just looking to connect, then eventually you're going to know what someone actually values, and if you know what they value, then you're not going to have these types of problems, or it's going to be pretty clear whether that person even wants that job or not, or why they're in that job, right? I remember in baseball, my coach, if you lost by like a bad call or something like that, right, and there'd be half the team, well, majority of the team would be upset at the ref or whatever the case, or the ump, and he would always say, well, don't get mad at the ump. You put yourself in a position to lose by that one call, right? So going back into the management or whatnot, it starts from the very beginning. You need to be connecting and understanding who your team is so that you don't lose by one person or whatever the case. So you don't have to put that pressure on that one person. Yeah. So you actually have the space to allow that person to grow or to understand, because the person actually, they may not be selling and it's a sales job, but they're adding value. I've never been in a sales job where even the worst person didn't add some type of value, right? They may have been the person who made everybody laugh every day, right? Made everybody want to actually come to work in this like God forbidden job.
Yes, right.
So I think that's super important. And that's
and are they a salesperson? Right. Should they be compensated as a salesperson? Should they, right? So we can start to look at those things and ask those questions.
Yeah, totally.
So Julius, what you said something, and it sparked my thought on our next segment. Are we ready? Are we ready for workplace stories?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's go.
So we were talking about AI, right? And we're talking about kind of people, when you're not in the best frame, right? What might happen? And so. It was in the news. There was at least one platform. I won't divulge too much, right? Because people might know, and I don't want to get my friend in trouble for divulging some insider secrets. Several of the platforms weren't operating correctly. One of them even was picking a fight with somebody. Was like swearing at them, and right. And so I asked my friend. I said, "How could this happen? How could this happen?" And so.
Hold on. You said that something was swearing at. Be more so we understand.
So somebody was interacting with one of the AI platforms, right? And they basically picked a fight with the AI platform, and the AI platform was returning in vulgarity, right? It was I'm gonna assume it was matching the energy. I didn't get to see like the BuzzFeed on what actually was the text, right? That would have been great. So I asked my friend who works for a big tech company how this might happen, right? And so the response I got was, well, it could be one of three things, right? There was so much turnover in these, like people were jumping ship, right? It was, you get a $50,000 bonus and you'd have to stay somewhere for 6 months, not even 2 years, right? Like they changed it used to be 2 years. They're like 6 months, right? So you got some of these higher end programmers that were just, they would get on at Google and within 2 months, you'd have somebody like Chris, like a recruiter, like, hey, Microsoft's hiring. They're like, well, I got to stay for 6 months to, unless I got to give back my bonus, but 6 months in a day, I'll be ready to start at Microsoft, right? And so 6 months and a day later, they would quit, and then they would go start at Microsoft, and they'd be there for 6 months, and they'd get their crazy, stupid bonus, and then they'd go work for maybe a startup for 6 months and get their crazy, stupid bonus.
That's the turnover.
That was the turnover, right? So when you have turnover like that with programming, right, every programmer kind of has, it's like an artist, right? They have their signature. And so that's like a lot of times you have issues, and it's gotten much, much, much better, but years past, right? If you outsourced to India, you would get a program back that worked at like 80 or 90% of what it was supposed to do, because you would have all these you'd have many, many, many programmers, but they all had their little artistry, their little signature. So they might code something in a certain way, and then the next person coded and maybe used a different word, like a British English version of a word versus a U.S. English version of a word, where center, right? C-E-N-T-E-R, as we would spell it here in the U.S. But if it was British, C-E-N-T-R-E, right? And so those little variations cause havoc.
So I know this isn't the point of your story, but are you saying that outsourcing it to India, they by definition have multiple programmers? Is that why there was the issue?
That's why the reason that it was outsourced to India was because you could get many more programmers for significantly less money, right? And so where in the US you might have one or two programmers that would work together on a program, but they would make an obscene amount of money, what was thought of as obscene. No one was making $1 million or more. But they would get burnt out because there would be two.
I was just wanting to tease out whether that was sort of a comment on the quality of the Indian programmers, or if it was talking about the fact that there was, by definition, when it was outsourced like that, many more multiple programmers.
Many more multiple programmers, which with individual learning, that created, so individually, good quality, collectively, bad quality, because you had too many variations, right? And so that's why you would oftentimes have issues. Now they've fixed that, right? We're big fans of Zoho. Zoho's beautiful. I'm trying to break it. I can't break it, right? So that's been figured out and it's been fixed, right? But AI is new, right? And so what ended up happening was you had all these different programmers coming in. They were getting headhunted. They would shift jobs, and so they would leave a set of code, and then it would be up to the next person to figure out where they left off, right? So that was one issue, right? Another issue was you could fake your resume. If I knew, and I wish I did, I don't, but I wish I knew what the keywords were to be an AI programmer, right? Like you could fake it. And because things were just so fast-paced and all over the place, management really didn't have time to see who was doing what their effectiveness was. So you had people that were kind of learning on the fly. And at best, and this is a quote, at best, it was a fake it till you make it situation. But unfortunately, with a lot of people, they forgot the make it part, right? Like, so there's the fake it happening, but not the make it. And so that was situation number 2. And then situation number 3 was people are just become disgruntled, right? I'm a leader on this project. We're behind schedule. I'm exhausted. So I don't have energy and capacity to be compassionate. And you're new on my team, and I start using tough language, right? Let's just say tough language, right? Chris, being in the military, couldn't handle tough language. Other people can't handle tough language, right? And so there might have been programmers that put that code in there just to spite their leadership. So this is, kind of what's going on. But I just, with this story, right, have you been in situations, right, where you've been doing something that maybe was over your head, right? You're pushing something out faster than it needs to go, right? Michelle, you were in pharma. I know they have a lot of rules and things like that, but there's also those criteria you're trying to get through, right? Do you have those situations? And then, we'd like to know too, from the folks that are listening to this podcast, send us those situations in, like email us or drop us a line somehow. We'll get that figured out. We'll have that as part of what we do and what you'll see. But we'd love to know, like, what are those stories that you've been involved with, that these situations happen where you're in over your head and didn't turn out well?
Yeah. I mean, not to be goody two-shoes, but I really didn't experience that in pharma. There's so many layers of checks and balances and safety involved, because we're talking about human lives here, that we really didn't do a lot of like cutting corners. What happened was, when something had to give, it was usually the people. It was a very people-focused corporate environment that I happened to be in. Not all of them are like that. And so people felt so identified with the mission that they would give up their vacations and give up their weekends and give up their nights. And that's not new. Lots of places do that. But I think the motivation was not, you weren't getting any more money for that, and you weren't necessarily getting a bonus for that. You were doing that because there was a phrase called "the patients are waiting." And so you get really identified with the mission, and these folks are suffering. In some cases it's life-threatening, and you're just like, all right, I guess I'll forget about spring break this year. Just work harder. And there's a beauty in that in a certain way, but it's also not really sustainable, and it's not really how it's meant to be. And so the cutting of the corners was the cutting of the people's mental health, I would say. But I know that there's probably situations that I'm not aware of in corners of my company where that was done, but really nothing that I'm aware of.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Unforeseen side effects.
Yes, right.
I think everyone's been in some type of, situation or, had some type of story where someone at their work was just really upset with their job and did certain things despite, right? I'm sure that's not foreign, right? So I could see that people being worked to death in AI, regardless of how big the bonus is, and trying to meet these like crazy deadlines in something that's completely new, being like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, all right, yeah, I'll get it done. Yeah, all right. Oh, okay, sure. And then put in whatever they want to put in, and because they know they're going to be gone anyway. I could see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, placeholder.
Yeah.
I don't know what to put here, so I'll just respond in vulgarity. As a placeholder, I'll fix it later. Oh, wait, I got recruited out.
Exactly. Well, I think that is a great first conversation that we had for the workplace theater. Any last words, Chris, before we...
No, it's been a great show. It's great to connect with you all, right? That's what it's all about, the human connection. And hopefully those of you that are listening in get an opportunity to connect with us more, and take this as an opportunity to connect with your employees, connect with the people in your community, and really start to think about what does human-centered engagement mean to you. It's going to be a show. That's why it's called Workplace Theater. The good, the bad, the ugly. See all that, and we're looking forward to seeing you tune in the future. Guys, anything
Awesome.
else? Huh?
No, that's it.
All right.
We nailed
See you
it.
next time.
All
See
right.
you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
If today's discussion resonated with you, don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button now, leave a review, and rate Workplace Theater. Your support helps us improve. Do you have questions or comments? Click the link in our show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning into the Workplace Theater.
We hope you've enjoyed our podcast. If you're interested in new ways to inspire your team, need help with a sticky workplace situation, or you'd like a communication and engagement strategy for an upcoming important objective, please contact us by emailing workplacetheater@gmail.com. This has been a Working Better Together experience, a division of Exponential Consulting, LLC.